What's good, everyone? You know what time it is. This month's Care for the Culture is about to get started. And look at my girl Callie already ready to go. So let's bring her on and get going. And get going. Ooh, here we go. Hey.
It seemed like it took forever.
It did. Oh my gosh. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Happy March.
Happy March. Right, right. Happy to see you in a new month. I don't know why all of a sudden saying happy March made it click that we are 3 months into 2024, and that feels a little wild to say out loud. But anyhow,
We are
um,
moving right along
I
this
mean,
year.
speed of light sometimes when you think of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which, speaking of light, daylight savings has
Knock
me
me
just
out. Like, what?
like, like I'm just waking up sleepy. I'm already a night owl, so I was already kind of thrown off, and daylight savings just made it like worse. But
And I
anyhow,
didn't even know it happened until like well into the next day. And I was like, oh, we're in a different hour. Okay.
right, right.
No
I
wonder I didn't sleep right and I'm tired and yeah.
right.
Mhm.
For sure. I both like love it because of I do love the longer days and stuff, but that transition, baby,
It's
I'd be like,
hard.
please leave me alone and let me stay in bed. But
Same.
anyhow, how are you doing?
I'm tired today.
Yeah.
I am tired today. I think on top of the daylight savings, that my sleep has just been really off. And
Mm,
so I'm just feeling that and like trying to function through the day and just make
listen.
it and survive. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm feeling tired.
Yeah, I hear that. Shout out to anyone who's watching this who also feels personally attacked by daylight savings. We see you, we feel you, and we too have been victimized. So, anyways, my name is Kayla. I am a who am I? I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in
Yeah, you are.
California. Woo! And the founder of the Well Healing, which provides holistic wellness services, events, and things for queer, trans, black, and people of color. And this is my hostess with the mostest.
Hey y'all, I am Katrina, aka Callie. I am a holistic healing arts therapist in the state of California and owner and founder of Manifesting Me Wellness, a holistic mental health organization. Uh, yeah, and we here to talk all the things mental health. And
Yeah.
today, I think we're going to be talking about our journeys becoming mental health professionals.
Yes. Yes. I'm excited to talk about this. I feel like this live will be especially useful and like generative for people who are either thinking about or are
Mm.
interested in like the mental health world, especially if you're interested in being like a clinical therapist. If you're in your journey, some of this might really resonate. And I just don't think we've ever maybe like shared in more depth like our process of actually getting here.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, so I'm excited to get into it. So if you didn't know, I only very recently came to the end of a very, very, very long journey to being
But that's how it
licensed.
be feeling. Yes.
So we're gonna get into it today. So I wanted to start with asking you, when did you decide, I
Mm.
guess, to pursue being a therapist?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's feeling important to acknowledge in this moment. So, Kayla is a licensed marriage and family therapist. However, I am a licensed clinical social worker.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, I love that we get to talk about the similarities and differences too. I didn't think about that.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's important to
Yeah.
acknowledge,
Yes.
because there are multiple avenues to take to be a therapist, and we
Yes.
took different ones in a
Yes.
way as far as our degrees are concerned. So that on the table. Um, I think somewhere in undergrad, like late undergrad, maybe like my third or fourth year, I decided, oh, maybe therapy. I
Mm-hmm.
think before that, I was going into social work, and I was very clear that like I wanted to work with people. I wanted to be in the realm of like helping
Mm-hmm.
people, but I wasn't totally sure in what capacity and what that looked like.
Yeah.
And my third year is when I really started like my social work classes. But
Okay.
my first 2 years, I took quite a few psychology classes, like Psychology 101, and then like continued with it because I was like, I kind of like this. This is kind of nice.
Yeah.
And then I don't think I realized until my third or fourth year in school that, oh, if you go and get a master's in social work, you can become a therapist. I
Mm.
don't think
Mm-hmm.
I knew that when I started college.
Yeah.
And so having those conversations of like, well, what does it look like to help people in what capacity? Also, I was doing internships, doing case management, and I was like, this is not really for me. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do case management. That's not what I came here for.
Yeah.
And starting to look into like what else is possible, and
Mm-hmm.
then realizing like, oh, I can go get a master's and sit with people and do something that I was already doing, listening, and um, being able to become a more appropriate and active listener and have
Mm-hmm.
some tools to help guide people through that process
Yeah.
of moving through things. That felt really good to me. So I think it was somewhere in that second, third year when I started to realize, like, I don't know if I want to do case
Yeah.
management. I still want to help people. I still want to be in the role of like social worker. And if I go and get a second degree, I can do the therapy thing. I
Right.
was like, oh, this is it.
This is it. Yeah. I love that. And so since you brought up, right, that like I'm an LMFT, you're an LCSW, what, or did you really pick between the two, and what, I guess we should maybe even explain exactly what they are and what the
Uh-huh.
differences are.
Uh-huh.
Um but that's sort of my question. Like, how did you decide your particular path of what kind of, I guess, therapist or clinician you wanted to be?
Yeah, I don't think that I chose between the
Mm,
two or even thought about anything other than social work because I realized I could just do it as a social worker, and that was already the path that I was on.
got you.
So it
Got you.
almost didn't like, it didn't cross my mind to think about something else because it was
Yeah.
like, oh, if I do this second degree in this thing I'm already learning, I can go and do this thing I'm realizing like you can do with a master's in social work. So
Yeah.
it never occurred to me to like, oh, let me look at like other
Hmm.
therapy programs. Like that was never, it never crossed my mind.
Yeah. But
And
that
I
makes so
landed in
much
social
sense.
work. Yeah, and I landed in social work because I told my advisor in high school, like, I really want to work with people. And she was like, oh, try social work. And I was like,
Hmm.
I didn't know that was like a real degree. Let me
Hmm.
look into this. And then I was like, oh, that makes sense. That sounds right up my alley. And so
Hmm.
I think it was just kind of like, oh, let me continue with this thing that already feels good to me.
Right. Got you. Got you. Okay. And again, y'all, they're very similar. I know sometimes I have folks who are interested in therapy ask, like, what is the difference? And so I'll share and then you add or correct.
Okay.
My sort
Okay.
of understanding is that there's a lot of overlap in things that are
Sure.
similar. One of the main differences, or the way that I guess I've come to think about it, is that LMFTs are a bit more specific in terms of working with clients, whether that's individuals or couples or families, groups, whatever, which LCSWs also do.
Sure.
I've thought of LCSW maybe different in that y'all also have a wider breadth of ways that you can be involved in mental health at the same
Sure.
time. So I'm thinking more like macro sense of like also maybe involved with like administration or policy
Sure.
work,
Absolutely.
which you might just see an LMFT less likely to be in there. Not even to say that that's not possible either. So
Yeah.
I don't know. What would you say to that?
Yes, and I think the ways in which our fields differed have shifted so much, I would
Hmm.
say, in the last decade,
Yeah.
that I think that there's less differentiation
Hmm.
because even I would say like people who decided between social work and LMFT before me, like generations before me,
Yeah.
would say that they chose one or the other because in social work it was much more like um, working with someone and communities and working with uh, potentially like administration or policy or things of that nature, or leaning more towards that like community oriented work.
Hmm.
And so they leaned more into LMFT, which felt more like psychology based.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
but then that wasn't my experience in my social work program. Like we learned diagnosis, maybe
Right.
not at the level as some of my LMFT friends, but like we were also learning diagnosis and very psychology based.
Right.
And so I think the differentiation, like the differences have narrowed a lot in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of ways. And because I would even argue that the people before me who became social workers, their learning in social work was much more like a holistic lens. They did like
Mm-hmm.
biopsychosocials and they were looking at every part of the person. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
LMFTs who came before me, they didn't have as much of a holistic lens. They were just
Mm.
very geared towards like looking at the
Right.
individual and like what's happening in this
Right.
scenario and diagnostic criteria and like how do we move through that. Like it was much more regimented. And I
Yeah.
feel like I know LMFTs who are like, oh no, we like we're really taught how to be very holistic, biopsychosocial based. So I think the differences have shifted a lot.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. That is such a good point. And then something useful to think about, or I guess that almost makes it sort of easier to just kind of get in where you fit in, because
Mm-hmm.
you can make this role into whatever, feels most authentic to you. So
Absolutely.
I guess just what letters do you want behind your name at this point? Because we're all
What's
kind of
accessible to you because
mm,
some schools have MFT programs, some schools have social work programs,
right.
and some social work programs have concentrations in children and families or couples or whatever. Like it, what's accessible to you, what's
Hmm.
readily available, I think
Yeah.
can really dictate like where you want to go and what part of the country you're in. Because I would say that in certain parts of the country, LCSWs have a leg up on LMFTs, and in other parts of the country, LMFTs have a leg up on LCSWs. Like they're just recognized differently in
Mm,
different states or in different places. So I think it really just depends on like what's accessible and is going to
yeah.
make sense for your path.
Yeah. Totally, totally. And even who like the credentials that we have are just a couple of many, again, different ways that people can be in mental health as a PsyD or a
Mhm.
doctor, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, like, so,
PCCs are a thing now too.
LPCC, exactly. So, if you're interested, thinking about getting into this field, like, just do, your research just to see, again, like what you said, what's accessible, what's authentic, what feels aligned for you and your life path. So I love that. For me, I think as well, I came into college already studying psychology. I
Mhm.
knew that I had a sense of also wanting to like work with people. And I've said before that it's always sort of been just like a very natural community role that I have fallen into. And
Sure.
so kind of same with you. I ultimately decided, let me just figure out how to do this professionally to be
Hmm.
a appropriate active listener. Um, and that was really what kind of guided my path. I actually at first thought I really wanted to do art therapy.
Okay.
But the art classes at my undergrad were too hard to get into. They weren't
Mhm.
accessible, so I had to pick a different a
Exactly.
different route because that wasn't working. And
Yeah.
as part of my requirements to graduate, I had to do a little internship. And so I was actually at a community clinic reviewing
Mhm.
therapist notes. And that's when I think it really clicked for me like, oh, I want to know more about like what is happening in the session. Like, what is the client
Mhm.
saying? How are they working with this? And so I think that really provided like certainty that I want to continue to pursue this in my education and stuff like that. And we were off. Um,
Mhm.
I took some time after to find the program because, as you kind of mentioned before, there are so many nowadays, like specializations that you
Yeah.
can get and stuff like that. So for a while, I toyed with a program. Ooh, that was, I want to say, it was something Black specific.
Oh,
Yes, which, if you know me,
right.
felt very like
Yeah.
in my lane. Also wasn't as accessible as like the program that I ended up in
Sure.
at Cal State Long Beach. Shout out to my Long Beach folks. But I am happy for where I ended up.
Absolutely.
Um
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I'm curious. You wanted to start in art therapy. Did you ever go back?
I didn't, and I've thought about it because I could
Sure.
like take some classes and things now. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe like in the future that's something that I really come back home to. So
Mhm.
an ever evolving journey, but for now
Absolutely.
I've kind of put it down.
Okay.
Um, yeah. Do you feel like you knew what to expect in your
No,
grad program?
absolutely not. You don't even have to finish that question. I didn't know what to expect in the grad program. I didn't know what to expect when I got in the room with clients. I didn't know what to expect after graduation. I didn't know what to expect when getting these hours. I didn't know what to expect once I got licensed. I had
Yo,
no idea what
period.
to expect across the board. I had no idea what I was getting myself
Oh
into.
my God, same, literally same. When I don't be like me, when I tell you I was figuring out the requirements as as the journey went, like I was so under prepared. But how did you feel about your grad program? What were like some of maybe the challenges or like the
Yeah.
highlights? Yeah, what was your experience like?
Um, I enjoyed my grad program a lot. So what in undergrad, what happened was I decided that I really wanted to work with folks who were in and out of incarceration or at risk of incarceration.
Okay.
And so I started this path of like taking classes in the criminal justice department and was like, okay, we can get a concentration. We have to get a concentration as a part of our like bachelor's of social work degree. Can mine be in criminal
Mhm.
justice? And they were like, no. I said, why? It's fully applicable. I don't understand. And I was
Yeah.
like fighting with my program around this. So my
Wow.
concentration ended up being in psychology, but I got a minor in criminal justice because I wanted to learn about this population that I wanted to work with. And
Yeah.
so I very intentionally sought out um, programs for social work that were related to that specifically had concentrations or separate certification
Mhm.
programs that were connected to the grad program that were specifically for forensic social work. And so
Mm.
there, I found out there was only three in the entire country. I applied to two of them because I was not going to Georgia, and I ended up back in LA taking forensic social work grad program at Cal State LA, and it was everything that I had been fighting for in undergrad, where I was taking classes that were geared towards this population and marrying these two areas that seemed so almost like against
Yes.
each other. Like they
Mm.
seem so like on
Mm.
opposite ends of the spectrum, but we both work with this same community,
Yeah.
right? And so it felt like I was learning how do I navigate all of this? And I was learning that in one space. How do
Yeah.
I do therapy in an environment that is very rigid and people don't have a lot of choice and they're here because they have to
Yeah.
be, and like what does it look like to work with probation officers and police officers but also with clients who are dealing with probation officers and police officers.
Mm.
So in that way I loved it. It was everything that I felt like I had been fighting for,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that felt really good to me.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm so glad you were able to find that space, even with all the initial resistance, which resonates for me. I feel like in my own ways in my grad program, I also was bumping up against a lot of resistance on the things that I wanted to talk about in a different way, but I totally feel you. Um, the program that I was in, I think did a really great job of preparing me and setting a foundation of like the
Mm.
skills that I would need to do in order to be a clinician. And I'll say that became very clear, especially when I got to my traineeship, which we can get to next. But so I will say that like I feel like and the school does have a good reputation of it having a
Sure.
really strong program and stuff like that. So it offered me so much. In general, though, mental health as a field is, as with everything in this country, is rooted in
Mhm.
anti-blackness. It's
Absolutely.
ableist as hell. It's Eurocentric as fuck. Like it has just all of these different things that what came up for me a lot in my program is being like, for example, this blank slate thing that y'all are telling me,
Yeah.
I'm like, that does not make sense. It doesn't work with the people who I'm trying to sit across with
Hmm.
in the room. And so for better and for worse, I had to, there was just a lot of discussions that I feel like I needed to have in the classrooms. I don't know
Sure.
how my professors felt about it, but but we made it through. And thankfully I was still able to end up in a program that got me to where I needed to go. So like
Sure.
I'm telling y'all, I'm figuring out along the way, like this doesn't just end once you
Right.
graduate. You
Yep. Uh-huh.
have to gain all of these hours.
Yep.
You have to take all of these tests. When I tell y'all, I had no idea for real what the journey looked like. So eventually in the program, you have to, I'm pretty sure it's true for y'all too. You have to have a
Yep.
traineeship where you're starting to like gain hours. You haven't graduated yet, but you are essentially, a baby clinician trying to
Yeah.
get your feet wet. And so where was or what was your traineeship like? And yeah, how was that part of your journey?
So in my program, we actually had to do one each year.
Oh,
So both years we had to have, we called them internships, but we had to
okay.
have an internship. And so my first year, which I never thought I would be doing, the first year they placed you, the second year you interviewed and decided where you wanted to go. So the
Fascinating.
first year I got a call and was like, "You're going to be doing hospice." And I was like, "Huh?
That's deep.
What?" Like, I never in my life thought that I would be doing hospice. So, for folks who don't know, hospice is um, basically like when people are 6 months are have been told that they have 6 months or less to live.
Hmm.
They go on
Hmm.
hospice, which is just kind of like palliative care, just
Hmm.
kind of keeping them comfortable. And they have social workers who provide like resources to the family, who go and provide socialization to the clients as well, which sometimes can look like providing therapy and sometimes looks like just more like resourcing and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And then I also ran like grief groups. So that was
Mm.
my first year, and that
Wow.
was a whirlwind. I never, like, it never occurred to me that that's something that I would be doing.
Mm.
And also touched really close to home because
Mm.
I had a grandparent who had just been placed on hospice like 2 months
Oh,
before.
yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I guess we're in this, we're doing this thing. So that was my first internship. And then my second one that I got to choose an interview for. I worked as a therapist in a community agency that specifically worked with youth who were incarcerated or on probation, coming out of incarceration on probation, and they had like a joint probation, um, continuation school, substance abuse counseling and
Mm.
therapy. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of doing the therapy in that setting. So a lot of like drug court stuff, doing therapy with teens who were at risk of being incarcerated,
Yeah.
and like working with folks who were coming out of their incarceration and helping them to reintegrate into society.
Mm.
Very different
Yeah.
role. Very completely different role.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. That's so cool though. Both of those I imagine would teach you so much. I feel like to be able to learn how to be present with someone in hospice, like end of life care, that's a major skill set, to be able to hold that kind of space. So for that
Oh
to be
yeah,
your
that was
first,
a lot.
yeah, go through, yeah, what That's Me Cheryl said, such important work. And hey, thanks for being in here. Um,
What was your traineeship like?
yes. So in my program, we only had the one, and we called it a traineeship, which happened before your internship, where you became like an MFT. Well, now they call it an
Mhm.
associate, not an
Associate.
MFT intern.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked at Kaiser Permanente, their Watts Counseling Learning Center location. And it was one of the best experiences that I've
Mm-hmm.
had. First of all, just working anywhere, because
Oh, okay.
child, she does not dream of labor. But but I really enjoyed working there. And really getting to work with the communities that have my heart most.
Sure.
And so I had a really just wonderful experience, quite honestly, of really cutting my teeth of like what it means to hold space for folks where there are lots of like accessibility issues, and
Right.
how to
Absolutely.
work and make connections in a community, and what it really looks like
Mm-hmm.
There's the textbook things that they teach you,
And
and
then
then there's what
there's
actually
real life.
happened
Yes.
exactly in the therapy room. And so, quite honestly, it was a really wonderful experience. I have
Mm-hmm.
nothing negative to say about the folks there, the people there. I have never like had long-term coworker friends, but I have people there who I still adore and
Oh,
talk to.
my God.
So yeah, I had a really great traineeship and did that all the way until I had to leave because I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so after graduation, then you're just gaining hours and stuff, right? So for MFTs, it's 3,000 hours. Is it the same or is it different for
I
y'all?
think it's about the
Okay.
same. It's
Okay.
somewhere in there. It's been a minute,
Yeah.
but it's somewhere in there.
Fact.
Yeah.
And also, y'all, so different states have different requirements. So we're also talking
Absolutely.
very much in like a California context. And California, I'm pretty sure, is one of the most difficult states
Mm-hmm.
to get
We have some of
licensed
the most
in. Yes,
restrictive requirements. Yeah.
exactly. So gaining hours. Child, mine, you want to go first? Mine was kind of a mess all over the place.
Mine was all a mess.
Oh, okay, wonderful. So we can just share our mess together. So y'all, like I said, she doesn't dream of labor. The short backstory of that is there was a time I was really scared because I was like, I don't like working, but I have to do
Mm-hmm.
this for the rest of my life. What am I going
Right.
to do? So what Kaiser Watts taught me is I just have to be very specific on where I'm at. So I really, I could have just jumped in anywhere. I was like, I really want to work at some place where that isn't going to like drain my soul to
Sure.
show up there every day.
Absolutely.
So, after some searching, some community connections, that's important, y'all. That networking all throughout is no joke. I did end up getting to work at a women's transitional shelter in
Mm-hmm.
downtown LA. Ooh we gonna keep that so short. The wonderful thing about oh my gosh. The wonderful thing about it was that I was essentially running my own little like mental health. It was
Oh,
really
wow.
just me, but I was the only like clinician on staff for this building that hosted. It was
Wow.
women and supposed to be one child who were eventually going to be launched into living in long-term housing and all of these different things. I was the resident therapist, and so I was essentially figuring out private practice in this
As
setting
an intern? Oh,
as
my
an
goodness.
internet. I'm supervised, obviously, right?
Sure.
My supervisor though is offsite.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
here every day. And again,
Mm-hmm.
more community work, right? So I couldn't like just sit in the office and wait for these people to come to me. They looking at me
Sure.
like, girl, what I want to come tell you my business
Right.
for. So learning how to like you sit in the lobby and you
Solicit
greet people as
client.
they come through. So that was an experience
Mm.
that suddenly ended. I had never been they just didn't have the funding anymore. So
Um,
all of a sudden I was without a job, terrified. But that eventually brought me to starting part-time my own private practice since I was like, well, if I could do this here, let me
sure.
figure it out. And then I worked at a university as a clinician um, for a while too. And eventually, after the panini, that school had some issues. And so I jumped ship and just went full time private practice to finish out my hours. So
Hmm.
that's the nutshell of the journey. But what was your experience like gaining hours? It's the deep exhale for me.
So okay, so again, the few differences. LMFTs can do private practice work as
Mm-hmm.
interns.
Mm-hmm.
LCSWs, we have more restrictions around that. And so there isn't a lot of conversation about private practice ever. Right. About private practice ever in any of our like learning
Mm.
because it like there's a lot of barriers around being in private practice until you're licensed as
Yeah,
a clinical social worker.
sure.
So I went the community mental health route, and I was in, I guess, three agencies over the course of a few years,
Mm.
um, doing in-home therapy,
That's
where I was like
gangster shit, y'all.
driving through the community wherever they were
Yeah.
at my, some of them it was at the house, sometimes it was at school, depending on the age groups that I was working
Mm.
with. The last agency I was at, like it was wherever they are, because I was working with a really under-resourced population,
Yeah.
and so like they were unhoused, and so if they chilling at the park today, we're going to the park.
Yeah.
If they're
That's what's
chilling
up.
at Jack in the Box today, we're at Jack in the Box, right? Like whatever
Yeah.
it is. Um, and so I did that, and every single one of those agencies was a lot. Um, I had also put off getting my hours for a while, which is a whole story. Like I had to take an extra year to finish my thesis, and so then I wasn't able to like, I walked but I wasn't graduated, so then I worked in case management for a while, and then I had to find somewhere to like start getting hours. That's a whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I did
Yeah.
that community mental health for a while, liked it in some ways, really didn't like it in other ways.
Fair.
It was a lot of like just playing with systems and being at the whim of systems, and also working with a lot of kids in the first two agencies. And so you're also at the whim of just parents and people who are under resourced and not present and not
Yeah.
having access to what they're needing. And
Yeah.
so the kids are suffering.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed working with kids, thought that that's what I wanted to do. Then my last agency was kind of given the opportunity to work with that transitional age youth. And so it was like older teenagers,
That's my
young
people.
adults.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I kind of like it
Mm.
here.
Mm-hmm.
And I also got the opportunity there to do some work with folks. They had an AB 109 program. I'm forgetting what that means, but it's like a after people come out of incarceration,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
part of their like probation or what have you is to receive therapy. And so I was also a part of that program and
Wow.
helping people transition back into the community. So really liked it. Very overworked, quite
Mm.
underpaid,
Yeah. Yes.
always
Ooh.
short staffed,
Yeah.
never had what I needed, never felt like I was getting what I needed to get to
Yeah.
feel fulfilled truly. Often had some kind of on-call
Mm.
process that I had to take part in.
Yeah.
Um, it was just very like invasive to my life in a lot
Yeah.
of ways.
Yeah.
It took
For
over a
sure.
lot, and I didn't like driving. I didn't like being out in the world all the time
Yeah.
and communing with people. I had a lot of incidents of
Yeah.
like client emergencies and a lot of learning to like, what I think was really good about it, my diagnostic skills are amazing.
Mm.
Like
I bet.
my
Yeah.
assessment skills, I can hear. Like,
Yeah.
going on there? That's more high needs than I'm willing to handle in private
Right.
practice. I'm gonna send you on over here.
Right.
That's not my role.
Yeah.
And I have noticed that my ability to diagnose and assess things
Mm.
are beyond some
Top
of my
notch.
colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Wow.
I'm like walking people to, well, it kind of sounds like there might be something else going on here. You